It is such a gift to be here among you today, to be in this pulpit on this historic church, in this historic church. I was ordained actually in 2006 at West Shore Unitarian Universalist Church in Cleveland, Ohio. But this church was my first called ministry. And this is the church where my tools were sharpened as a minister against the wonderful sermons of both Marlon Lavenhar and being able to listen to John Wolfe. So there are a lot of, I won't say ghosts, but there are definitely there's a lot of energy in this space for me that is comforting and quiet, and I hope it also serves you as well, regardless of whether or not you have those same stories. Some of us came here today still carrying the noise of last night. Whether it was the roar of Bernie Sanders' voice here in Tulsa saying despair is not an option, or whether it was the headlines from Juneteenth here in Tulsa of shots fired, or of missiles launched across oceans. Maybe carry with you into this space the fear that war has already begun and we weren't even asked. Maybe, like me, you felt that pit in your stomach, the dread that maybe this time we might not come back from it, or that we're standing on the edge of something irreversible yet again, and still being asked to normalize it. Some in this room, I'm sure, have worn uniforms or loved those who have worn uniforms. Some have crossed borders. Some are holding the names of loved ones right now, loved ones who might have been near where the bullets or the missiles landed. And yet here we are in this room with breath in our bodies and neighbors beside us. This generation has inherited more than just collapse. We've inherited the silence around collapse, the shame, the sense that to name what's breaking makes us ungrateful or unpatriotic or disloyal. But I refuse to believe that and invite you to consider that the opposite might be true. That naming the wound is a refusal to abandon what we know is worth saving, which means there's still time to notice what we'd rather avoid in the world and ourselves. In times when we are fighting oligarchy in our systems, in our neighborhoods, sometimes even in our own families, it's easy to believe the only way forward is with force, resistance, or fire, or just as often, silence, or exile, or numbing. But collapse doesn't always come in flames. Sometimes it arrives quietly, in a drawer we haven't opened, in a memory we've been avoiding, in the sound of someone finally telling the truth. What if collapse isn't only something to resist, but something we're actually called to witness, to tend to? I've actually seen this happen right here in this community, in the person who drives their neighbor to dialysis every Thursday morning without ever posting about it, in the young adult who brings groceries to their grandmother and lingers longer than needed because they know their presence says more than the food, in the couple who stayed together long enough to learn how to fight kindly, even when it was sometimes hard to love generously, in the teacher who kept showing up this year as education was under constant threat, not because it got easier, but because the kids kept coming, and so did she. and the willingness of so many of you to show up to yet another memorial service, or to serve tea, or bring a casserole. Tending collapse isn't glamorous. It doesn't trend, but it does hold more of the world together than we actually realize. You heard the story earlier that I wrote about a drawer in the hallway, one that people walk past not because they're lazy, but because something about it whispers, "Not today." We all have something kind of like this. Maybe it's in our kitchen or somewhere else in our home, or maybe it's in our hearts. It might hold a letter you've never sent, or a photo you're not ready to look at, or a truth you're not quite ready to live with. But one day, not because everything is fixed, but because something in you is ready, you choose to sit down beside it and to take a look and to listen. Surprisingly, opening that drawer isn't what breaks us. It can actually bring us back. Sometimes what we find inside is a version of ourselves, one who might not have been ready to come out until now, because it believed our very survival meant closing it again. Sometimes collapse sneaks up on us. I actually forgot what my father used to look like. Not completely, but enough. After 20 years of watching his body twist and shrink from MS, I stopped remembering how tall he was. I stopped remembering the strength in his shoulders, the ease with which he once lifted me with one arm. That version of him became the past, and he was a shadow of his former self to me. And then one day in November in 2011, my father passed away between my visits to the Norman Veterans Administration. I made the difficult choice to see his body before he was cremated. It wasn't a popular decision with the funeral home or with my family. These things weren't ordinarily done. But I knew I wanted to see him, or a part of me wouldn't have believed that he had actually died. I had no idea what I would find. I was afraid. I had known him as curling in on himself into a wheelchair for over 20 years. But when I walked into the room where he was, and I saw him stretched tall and long on the gurney, all 6 feet of him, I remembered. I was able to see that he was so much more than his disease. I caught a glimpse of his body before the collapse. It undid me. Not in the way I actually feared it would, but in a way that truth can sometimes sneak up on us and allow us to finally exhale because it was no longer hidden. That moment healed something in me. It didn't erase the loss, of course. It actually handed it back to me with the edges softened, with the truth of him more whole. Something had settled in that moment, a stillness that followed years of a storm. It wrecked me not because it was gruesome, but because it was beautiful. And grief has never quite known what to do with beauty. But both coexist in the world and inside us. Sometimes the truth of collapse is the only honest thing left, and it can be a strange kind of restoration. Sometimes the things we avoid aren't grotesque or broken. We're just afraid they will undo us. But maybe being undone is the only way we remember fully. Maybe that's where the real work begins. We live in a culture built on urgency and perfectionism, a drive to fix, to move on, to solve it, and fast. But the work really isn't about fixing. It's about recalibrating. Right now, scientists are preparing to remove a second from our clocks all over the world. Not add, remove. Because the Earth's rotation has shifted just enough that even the atomic clock, the most precise tool that we have, had to admit something's changed. Let's start again. Now listen, I'm all for sneaking extra time. I just want to say that my wife Bonnie and I got married on Leap Day, February 29th of 2016. And after weeks of trying to coordinate our calendars and choose the perfect officiant, you can imagine, we gave up on perfect and got curious about what was possible. Leap Day was a Monday morning that year, and we decided at 10:30 a.m. and were married by sunset. Who gets married on a Monday? I mean, apparently us. So we leapt. So technically, we've only had like 2 real anniversaries, so we're practically newlyweds. Because love, like Earth, doesn't follow a calendar. It follows movement. And sometimes it demands a different kind of time. It's like those silent, unmoving witnesses, the trees all around us. Do you know when a tree is under stress, it actually stops growing upward and quietly begins reinforcing its roots? You can't see it, not right away, but it is actually still growing. It's just going inward for a while. That's tending. Not giving up, not collapsing, just changing direction. A few years ago, before my cancer diagnosis, I built a garden. Now, for those of you who don't know me, I don't do anything small. I started with 16 by 18 feet, full of tomatoes. I mean, this is huge. Full of tomatoes and greens and cucumbers and watermelon. I pulled weeds. I watched the bees find the blossoms. It fed my family. We had plenty to share, and it fed something deep inside me. And then, when I discovered I had cancer, during the treatment, I didn't have the strength to tend to one more thing. And so my 16 by 18 foot garden became a weed forest, literally, with weeds taller than me. And for 2 seasons, I just let it grow wild. Not because I didn't care, but simply because I couldn't. I let it stand as a kind of monument to my survival, to seasons, to what it means to love something even when you can't maintain it. And this year, through my treatment, and now beyond cancer, I asked for help. We cleared what needed clearing, we tilled, we planted new life, same soil, new season. That's what tending collapse can look like too. Just returning with breath, with help, with time. And while the world keeps shifting under our feet, tonight, for those of you who are tracking, amidst the news of missiles and shootings, the Thunder will play Game 7. And because collapse doesn't cancel the ordinary, it kind of folds into it. If you've been watching this series, you know, right? I think I have some new gray hairs, not just from our current president, but also from the Thunder game. Games. Back and forth, and big leads blown, and agonizing moments, and dropping the ball ridiculously a certain number of times. But then hope shows up, and then it disappears, and then it claws its way back. And it's been relentlessly painful and still full of possibility. Because the journey didn't stay in one direction, because collapse didn't cancel what could be. It just cleared space for it. So it turns out collapse doesn't always end things. Sometimes it just reframes them, reshapes them, not by erasing what happened, but by clearing the way for what can happen next. In my work in restorative justice, we are present to a lot of harm. And we also spend a lot of time talking about what comes after the harm. So often in our culture, both the person who caused the harm and the person who experienced it are quietly pushed outside of the circle. Different doors, same message. You don't belong anymore. Both pushed to the margins, one because of what they endured, the other because of what they've done. And we hold space for them at RJIOK and say, you're not the worst thing that you've ever done, and you're not the worst thing that's ever happened to you. Because what is required for repair is not exile, it's relationship. Not necessarily with the one who caused the harm or transferred it, but always with someone willing to see us as more than our wound of the moment. Someone who can listen, bear witness without flinching, and know that we are in process. Sometimes the loudest decisions in the world, the kind that make headlines like shots fired and missiles launched, are just louder versions of what we're already doing inside of ourselves, pushing away what feels too hard to hold. But collapse isn't punishment. It's actually a cry for reconnection, a cry to see things just as they are, and also to see possibility. There are versions of ourselves that we exile. Maybe it's the one who couldn't speak up, or the one who kept adding to the drawer, or the one who numbed out, or lashed out, or the one who just survived. Tending and compassionately witnessing doesn't ask us to justify those parts. It asks us to appreciate the fear, the needs behind those choices, to recognize their values and say, you don't have to do that anymore. There's another way. That's where the healing begins. That's how collapse becomes compost. So let's be clear. I refuse the narrative that collapse means failure. I refuse the belief that war is inevitable. I refuse to become numb just to feel safe. We don't have to harden to be strong. We don't need to win to stay aligned with what matters. And we don't need to be unscathed in order to be trustworthy. So maybe today isn't the day you clean out that drawer. Maybe today you just sit beside it. Let your hand rest on the handle and breathe. Stay curious about the part of you that put things in it. Because tending collapse might also look like a phone call that you don't rush, or a question that you finally ask, letting yourself cry without needing it to mean something. Or maybe it looks like a clock that you adjust, a second you give back to the day, or a breath you release that you didn't know you were holding. I believe that the world changes when enough of us do that at once. Not in headlines, but in the unseen. The neighbor who opens their door, the teacher who doesn't give up, the policymaker who asks one more question before signing, the activist who rests, not to quit, but to last. We can't unlaunch the missiles, but we can choose not to be complicit in silence. We can tend collapse with stubborn presence. We can plant again in soil we once thought was ruined. We can choose awe and attention. And we don't have to fix it all. We don't have to hold it alone. But we do have to look. We can stay open even just a little to the edge of our discomfort, to the edge of our becoming. We can tend to what trembles, and that might just be the beginning of everything. Thank you.